In this session, I will cover how to visualize and render small spaces, and then how to use lighting in these spaces to achieve your best rendering results. The tools that I will cover are the Floor Overview Camera, or what I call the Dollhouse View, Hide Exterior Facing Items, a camera setting that will hide walls and items that attach to the walls, like cabinets, doors, and windows, setting the camera's field of view to be wider, and then finally using the 3D cross-section slider. I've opened up two different sample plans. One is a very small set of rooms, and the other one is a larger house. I want to show you the differences as you navigate between looking at a larger plan and then trying to visualize smaller spaces, and then how that may be different for just the smaller space itself. I'd mentioned using the camera view tool, which is the perspective floor overview, what I call the dollhouse view. This camera allows you to tip down and you can kind of rotate around and see exactly what is going on in the design. And you can move between rooms pretty freely and tip the view and get the exact view you're after. Let's look at one particular feature in this camera setting as I move back over into the larger floor plan. We'll use the same camera tool and we'll use the perspective floor overview dollhouse view. Now I've opened up this view. It's on the second floor, and the default with this camera is to show the floors below. And if you want to mask that and only see the current floor in this case, I'm going to go up to the Edit Active View tool, and toward the bottom of this dialog underneath the Options area is the setting to show lower floors in the overviews. When I turn that off and close the dialog, this will mask out and prevent the lower floor from being displayed. You can see this is an open below room, and it's a setting that you may find helpful as you're using the perspective floor overview tool. Now the other setting in this camera as we move back over into the small plan is to hide exterior facing walls. Some of these rooms are pretty small. I have a water closet down here and it's pretty difficult to see into this space. So one of the settings that you can use in the Edit Active View, again towards the bottom of the Options panel down here in the camera setting, is to hide the exterior facing items on those walls. And what's going to happen here is anything that's attached to the wall, electrical, cabinets, windows, doors, will be hidden as you move your view around. So as I kind of slide this view around, every time the camera is facing that orientation, the walls are hidden and anything that's attached to that wall will be hidden. If it's not attached to the wall, you may see something larger like this cabinet over here. That's actually on an interior wall, and so it's not going to be hidden. It may also not be attached to the wall. So if you have something that is not attached to the wall, it might be a polyline solid or some 3D solid that you have on there. It may not be attached. In fact, as I rotate around and look at the back of the bedroom set, this is a solid from the bedroom set. It's not attached to the wall. Also, you see a couple of strands. These are LED lights and moldings. Those are not actually attached to the wall. You may need to put those on a different layer so they don't display. Now let's go back into the floor plan view and use the camera that is the full overview camera. And this one, I'll make the same setting. It allows me to then see the ceiling. So back into the camera settings under Edit Active View, we'll turn off the Hide Camera Facing Exterior Walls. And as I kind of zoom a little bit closer in, you can now see the ceiling portion of that, and it's a little more, has a little more context to what the scene is showing with the ceiling on. Let's rotate around a little bit. Again, as I rotate the camera, anything that is touching the wall and attached to the wall will be hidden. And since I'm using the overview camera, you can see the ceilings in here. Where it does have a ceiling, some of these rooms have soffits, and so there is no ceiling over the top of it. And it allows you to be able to get right in there and see the view And if you want to do an export of this, you can save the camera as well. It will save those settings, and then you can capture just the right view for that room scene. Let me close these views. I'm going to use one more camera. The camera I'm going to use here is just the perspective full camera. I'm going to come into the bathroom, and I'm just going to click and drag toward the bathtub. Now in this session, I'm just using the standard render camera. I want to be fast and efficient with this. Now in the 3D view, I'm looking at the room scene, and it's a small room, smallish room. And one of the settings you can make the adjustment on is called the field of view. And let's just move back over into the floor plan view so you can see what I'm talking about. With the field of view, you can see the camera, and when I highlight it, there's two lines that are shooting out from the camera, and that is the field of view setting. And I believe my default, let's open up that camera. I'm going to use the open object camera. And on the camera panel, again, I'm back underneath the options area. The field of view can be changed. My default is at 55 degrees, which is giving you the display of those lines coming out. And if I change the field of view, let's adjust it to 75, you can see the adjustment of those lines in the field of view. And then when I double click on the camera, that will widen your field of view, and you may be able to see more into, in this case on the right hand side, the shower, and you may be able to see more of the mirror on the left hand side. And if I go back in, we can do the same edit. Let's use the edit active view, and let's adjust that to maybe a full 90 degrees and take a look at what that change looks like. So this is about as wide as I can make this field of view, and now I can see pretty much everything from the face of that door into the room. And so the field of view may allow you to get the room scene you're after. The view might look a little bit distorted, but it kind of just depends on what you're after. Field of view setting can be helpful. The next tool I want to talk about is using the 3D cross-section slider. In this smaller plan, let's use the camera for the perspective full overview. I find this camera setting that I'm about to show you, the 3D cross-section slider, to be a little bit more helpful in larger plans, but it also works in smaller plans. Let's look at the camera view options, and the tool that I want to use is called the cross-section slider. And let's kind of just move that over to the side here. And this allows you to slice and dice the model in 6 different settings. So I've just clicked the top one here. And then you can use the slider here if you want to adjust this. Maybe you're trying to do a reflective ceiling plan or adjust it. And I'll click another one where we can pull that over, slide that around, and we'll just kind of pull that back. And now with that cross-section slider, you can get right into the room or area that you want to using that cross-section slider. And as you kind of just move and pull these apart, you can get exactly the room scene that you may be after. Let's go into the larger plan and look at using the same tool. Now as I switched plans, notice the cross-section slider is still up. This is a persistent dialog, so it's modeless and will always be here until I actually close it. So let's use the same camera tool here. Let's use the full overview camera. And here's our model. Again, the cross-section tool slider. And let's adjust that. We'll come up so we can see just the beginning of the floor plan at the top. We'll tip that down so we can peek inside. And so this is a nice tool I find on a little bit larger plans, but you still want to get in and see tight spaces. Again, each one of these settings, as you click and you pull these around, you can make the adjustment and then you can see into those spaces. You can turn on different layers. You can see the cavity inside here. Turned on the framing. You'd be able to see inside of that with the framing turned on. And so it's all layer based and allows you to get just the right view that you're after using that cross-section slider tool. Now there's one more setting I want to show you inside of the camera setting itself. As you're zooming in and you're getting really close to an object, let's see if I can get this to clip right inside the bed. You see how the clipping looks a little odd when I get close to that bed? I like to take my camera setting, and let's open up the Edit Active View tool, and there's a setting, again I'm on the camera panel, underneath Options, to the distance to set to clip your surfaces. I usually set that pretty low, and I'll set that to 1 inch. And that allows me to zoom really close to an object. And let's see if I can zoom in here, get a little bit closer to that bed. So I'll just zoom, see how close I can get before it starts to clip. So I can get much closer to objects before it cuts inside of it. And you see inside of it, especially like in a kitchen where you're looking at cabinets and you want to get close to an object, that clipping within 1 inch seems to be a good setting, and that's what I typically will set my defaults for my cameras. So these are the tools that I use, and I'm going to go back into the floor plan. I usually create a layer set for all of my cameras. You can access these inside of the project browser as well. As you kind of come over into the project browser and you're looking at, I have the bath plan open, and here's my cameras for the first floor. You can access those. I sometimes turn these on in a layer set so that it's easy to grab these cameras. So I've got a handful of cameras in the bathroom, and if you want to peek at these, let's just open up each one of these cameras, and I'll close the project browser so we have a little more real estate. Let's open up the camera that is on the left hand side. Let me double click on that, and that'll take a second. This is a physically based render to resolve the rendering. So I'm using the camera approach where I can pull the camera very near the back wall, and then again, if you look at the edit active view settings in here, on the options you can see my field of view 55 degrees and then the clip surfaces at within 1 inch. And as I go back into the floor plan view, let's talk about that camera. So you can move these cameras, and sometimes what I'll do is I zoom in. I will pull this back and make the adjustment. If I pull that back, you can kind of see where the field of view is going to start to intersect. And so I will use this and get it as far back as possible. Let's grab one more camera. This one over in the opposite end of the room, it's pretty close to the back wall. I want to maximize the view. And to maximize that view, you can I hold my control key down or command key on a Mac, and you can get very close to the corner. That may be too close, but let's kind of position this camera as far back as possible, and then we'll open it up, and that'll take a second here to resolve the camera. And I can tell immediately based on the view, I'm still seeing part of the window, and so the camera is too far into that corner window. So to move that camera, you can use your arrow keys, the letter I to move in, so that will move the camera in. I find when I use those jumps that it moves the camera more than it needs to. So to get refined control over that, you can click on the camera. Again, hold your control key down on a PC and your command key down on a Mac, and that way you can kind of position it if you just need to nudge it just a little bit. So we're still really close up here to the corner window. And then when we go back into that camera view, and we give that here just a second to resolve. Now I'm just past the window. I might want to adjust the rotation here just a little bit to try to get the view around. I've got line drawing on, so it's a little bit more computationally intense. There's the view that I kind of want to maximize the view. You can adjust your field of view to see if that will help in getting your view maximized. So those are all of the typical tips that I will use to try to get a rendering for a small space, and hopefully some of those will help you out. As I shift gears and talk about lighting tips for small spaces, I'm going to do so in the context of kind of optimized towards the physically based ray trace views. The same principles really apply to the other views, such as maybe the standard or even in the clay ray tracing, but I'm going to kind of focus on using these lights for producing the most photorealistic view. The first thing I want to encourage you to do is to create and use light sets. It's more important in a larger plan, so you can force the lights on for small rooms. Then making sure you adjust the light's intensity, the light color, and then using area lights for non-light objects, maybe TV screens, fireplaces, etc. In the split screen view I have open, the camera is rendered on the right hand side, and then I have all of the electrical on the left hand side in the floor plan view. And you can see most of the electrical in here. We have the recessed cans, we have a lighting up in the tray ceiling, there's LED lighting below the cabinets, and then also the LED mirrors. So these are the main light sources that are lit. You have to have lights to get a reasonable 3D view, and especially for using the physically based ray tracing. If there's no lights, you're not going to see much in this room at all. So I've done the electrical plan work in here, and as you kind of zoom in and you look at these items, the first thing that I want to talk about is using a light set. And let me just click on this camera. Let's use the open option. And on the camera panel, down in the lighting category, I'm not going to talk about sunlight so much. I'm going to focus more on the lighting information. You can see that maybe many of you use the automatic light setting in here, and you can set the maximum number of lights. And this plan isn't overly large, however, there are still probably several hundred lights in the plan because of the LED rope lights that have lights up to, they may have them every inch or every 3 inches or some other interval. And by the time you add those in your plan, you get a lot of lights. Plus there's a bedroom and a closet in this plan. So you might change that to 100 lights, right? You might set that to 100 lights and think, oh, okay, that's good. This plan could have a couple hundred lights. And in this room scene, I'm not forcing the program to just use the lights in this room. It could be using some of the lights, and maybe this light over here isn't going to be turned on for whatever reason because the program thinks, oh, you're closer to the bedroom, so on the other side of the door, I'm going to turn on the bedroom light and not this light, and you're not going to get this light turned on. And so you can force the program by using a light set to turn on the lights you want to turn on. And the way you do that is through a light set. Now the program ships with a default light set, and as you begin new plans, these light sets are really kind of dependent on your new plans. So you kind of need to build these for your plans that you want to get renderings with. So let's just use the adjust lights dialog down here. And you can see my light set is using a bath light set. There are other light sets in here. Since I've carved this out of a bigger plan, there may be light sets that aren't relevant. I should delete those, and I can. But I've got several light sets in here. And if you look at the light set here for the bathroom, let's sort that based on what's on. You can kind of go down here and see exactly what's on. You can sort it based on room. And so as you look at the room, and we're kind of focusing just on the bath suite, you can see that I have forced every single light to be on in the bathroom. And that way I know that when I create the camera and I take a 3D view, all the lights in that room will be on. Now, the other light set that I have is called, bath and closet, and also bedroom and closet. When you have a room and you're maybe going to have the door open and you want to have other lights on in the adjacent room, you might want to have a couple of light sets, and then you can just make a copy of these. And the way you create a new light set, again, I mentioned the program's going to come with typically a default light set. You can make a copy of those and then start turning on. The default light set typically has most of the lights on as you add them. And sometimes I'll use that because then I don't have to keep going in and turning a light on, especially if it's a super small project. I'll just use the default light set and just verify that all the lights are on. And if you want to make a copy of it, you can make a copy of it, give it a new name. We'll just call it new light set, and then you can come in here and turn on and off those different lights that you don't want in the space, and then you have a new light set. Again, these don't carry forward between plans. Rooms change, your designs change, so you'll need to also adjust your lights. Now while I'm in the adjust lights dialog, notice that some of these have an orange color, and if you look at some of these lights, I've colorized the lights through this setting. They can be white, they can be orange, they can be any hue of the lights you want. Temperature wise, you can look that up. Let me take a look at these settings and intensity and color in the next phase. So let's close these dialogues, and I'm going to maximize the 3D view here. And I'm going to begin with the light intensity, and let's just double click on this recessed light right here kind of in the middle of the ceiling. And I'm going to come over to the light data information. On the light data, there's a few settings. Specify as light, use area lights. I'm going to talk a little bit more about area lights here in a minute. The light intensity for this light is currently set at 1200 lumens. So I can adjust it. There's a drop down of different settings, and depending on how many lights, how high your ceiling is. You can choose the different setting. You're not restricted to these numbers. You can always type in a number exactly over here. If you wanted to have 1080 light lumens, then you can type in the information. And then immediately below this is the color hue. Now I clicked on the light, kind of slide this over a little bit. I clicked on this light over here and it's white. Now if you look pretty closely at the view, if you can tell this on the stream of the session here, this light is not white. And I've colorized it slightly. Don't ask me why, but I felt like it was maybe a little bit more interesting than just having white. So for the purpose of the session, I've changed that to have a light orange hue to it, and so it's casting a different light. And the way you change that setting is right here. So you can come over here, you can make the adjustment, and if you wanted to yellow it, I've been using kind of a theme of orange, and so I can make the adjustment in here. We'll make this adjustment. Let's make it a little bit more orange so this shows up. And I've now tweaked the light color. We'll see this when we close the dialog. Now there's other settings in the lights that I'm not going to really cover. There's a help option down here, but your tilt angle, the direction, the cutoff angle, the drop-off rate, how much does the light drop off from the source, and using the help option down here will give you that information. And sometimes for troubleshooting you can kind of see where the light source is. Right now there's an offset of 1/4 inch, so the light is actually being produced from the light just below that. And if you turn this to show position on in the camera view, you'll see it in your 3D view. Sometimes helpful in troubleshooting, especially if you have like a long chandelier with multiple lights in it. It can be helpful to see what that is. So now that I've just kind of reviewed the changing and setting of the light intensity, and probably one of the keys to that is when you take a 3D view, see how bright it is, and you can use that feature. Let's go ahead and click OK, and then we'll give that a minute to resolve. And I've used obviously a little bit different color on that light than I did on the light over here, but now you can see there is a colorization of that light. And so any of the lights you can make with the intensity scene. Let me close this view and let's look at one other option you can do with your settings. So I'm going to close this view, and then let's open up the view on the opposite side here. You can also adjust the lights through a process called dimming. And you can click on the light, you can dim it. The one I'm going to show you is I'm going to click, I know this circuit, as we look at the electrical over here, you can see this electrical is actually using a circuit, and it's connecting all of my recessed cans along that section of the room. So it's not going to be significant, but from the floor plan view, what I can do is I can actually click on that circuit. Difficult to see, but it's the switch on the left up here. And through the bottom edit menu is adjust brightness, and this is effectively like using a dimmer switch. And if I slide that over, let's slide it down quite a ways here so there's not a lot of light coming on. Click OK and give that a second to refine the view. And so once that is complete, the lights that are in this recessed bank up here, much dimmer than the other lights, and maybe helpful to get the right scene. So it's a nice way so I don't have to actually go into each light and tell it, instead of being 1200 lumens, it's 800 lumens. And using that dimming option can be a fast way, especially if you've gone to the effort of creating a circuit. So let me switch gears and I'm going to close this view. And the final thing I want to talk about is using area lights for non-light objects such as TV screens and fireplaces and the likes. In this room scene, you can see that I've used area lights to light up the garage. And if you pick on a few of these things here, maybe the tail lights or even the neon lights on the wall, these are using area lights, and you can set your materials to be emissive and actually emit light. That's what an area light is. It's an emissive material that emits light. Let me open up in this sample plan. I'm going to open up a bedroom camera that is using some area lights. So let's double click and open this camera up. Now in this scene, I'm going to point you to a few things that are area lights. One is the fireplace is using an area light. That's emitting light. The other thing that's emitting light that may not be as obvious is there is a rope light, a vertical rope light that is emitting light. And sometimes I get the question, well, how do you create a vertical rope light? Because the rope light tool, the electrical tool, typically only goes horizontally, which is what we may have up here. And sometimes you need the capability to create a vertical rope light. And what that is it's a solid, and I've taken the materials and set them to be emissive. And let's just explore that a little bit. So I'm going to use the Adjust Material Definition tool, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click on that light, which again is a 3D solid. And as we kind of open that up, I'm going to go over to the Properties panel and point you to the emissivity setting. And when you drop this down, kind of like the lumens we were looking at on the light, there's some predefined settings in here, and then you can also type in your value for that information in a very specific number, and you can set some other settings in here, and you can learn about that in the help file. So I've taken that material, which is just a simple orange material, and I named it Lighting Orange because I want it to emit light. And then on the Properties panel, I set it to an emissivity of 30,000. You may need to play with that a little bit and dial it in for your settings. And then let's look at on the fireplace, we'll use the same Adjust Materials tool. I'm going to click on the fireplace over here. I've taken a 3D solid. I've used the image Fire 6 material name and painted that, and the emissivity of that is pretty low. You compare that to 30,000 on that vertical light, it's pretty low. So I might mess with this a little bit, and let's crank it up so that we are cooking with gas here. And let's take a look at the effect on that room scene. So as that resolves, yeah, that's a bright fire. So the emissivity, that's actually emitting light. If I were to turn off the other lights in the room, you're going to get quite a glow. It's a function of how many other lights in there, and you're going to get quite a glow from the emissivity of that. And it can be a nice effect using that area light for non-light objects. Other light objects can also emit light if we pick on this fan light up here. So this light is set up to use the light itself of 500 lumens, and it's also using an area light. And let's just look at this again, 500 lumens, but the glass below it is an area light as well. And if I go over to the materials, and the materials are made up of several things. One is this lighting glass. Let's select that material, and then I'm just going to use the edit button and look at this material. It's called lighting white, and over on the properties, it's applying the emissive color from the light itself. So that means because that light was set to 500 lumens, it's going to control, again the light data was set to 500 lumens, it's going to control the amount of light in the area light, the emissivity setting based on the lumens. So that's a nice setting. I usually don't override that and just let the program manage that for me. So that wraps up the session that I have. Again, using lighting is really important for your room scenes. Remember to set the intensity, the color, and then for any of your rooms, build a light set. It just forces the program to render it. And then finally, area lights can add a little something extra into your renderings. And hopefully you'll find those tools helpful as you render your spaces, and in particular your small spaces. And thanks for watching.
Thanks, Scott. Our first question is from Margaret. Hi, Margaret. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi there.
Hi, Margaret.
I'm calling from North Carolina.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm currently working on a rendering for a kitchen, and I'm getting huge glare spots on my cabinets. And so I literally have turned off every light in the kitchen. I've even turned off the whole layer, and they're still there. What are they coming from?
So the lights are on and nobody's home or something, huh?
Yeah.
I'd probably have to take a look at that. Maybe you could send that into our support group. So you don't have any lights on and you're still getting hot spots. Is that right?
Yep.
What about your outdoor? You got windows, you got sun coming in. Is it possible that that's causing the hot spots?
I have some reflection in some of the glass door cabinets, and I know that that is from the outside. These are in the middle of the kitchen,
Hmm.
and they are exactly what you said, hot spots or two like spotlights that are right together. Like it's not a hot spot. It looks like it is a total reflection, and I just don't know where they are.
Right, right. Well, I would encourage you to send the plan in. I'll also maybe pause here and see if any of the chief staff members have an obvious answer to that scenario. So anybody out there? Well, Margaret, why don't you do this? Button that plan up and send it into our support group, and we'll see if we can open that up and see why your cabinets are so have hot spots on them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Carrie.
Oh.
Thanks, Scott. Our next question is from Bonnie. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, let's check in with Brandon. Hi, Brandon. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, Brandon.
From Columbus, Ohio here.
Okay, welcome.
So 2 questions, and maybe the easier one would be, there's a way you can add lighting that are fictitious lights. Do you ever use that, just adding an area light thing that isn't really a light?
Okay, yeah, so Brandon, that's a good question. Let me just kind of zoom in on this plan, and I'm going to switch over to the electrical. You can add, obviously, real lights like a recessed light or a rope light. There's also another light that is what's called a light source, and I assume that's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Light
Right.
source. And so you can add these things. Gosh, where is that? I haven't used one in a while. So underneath the add lights, I'm in this mode here, and this will produce a light. Also, if you click and drag, you can, before you release, it will create a spotlight. But let's just place a regular light here. And so this is a light. You don't see it in 3D, but it has all the typical settings. If I open that up, and you can go into the light data and specify lumens and all of the light information as you typically would for a regular electrical light. I don't really use these anymore. I used to use these quite a bit for a scenario in what was called CPU ray tracing, but we've kind of gone away from that. Let me see if I have a good example here. I've kind of gone away from that because I don't have a lot of need for those kinds of things. Let's see if I have it.
It was kind of more of just like, hey, if you're telling us best practices, it seems like the answer is do real lights.
Yeah, I pretty much use real lights, and I was trying to see if I had an example here of
While you're searching, I'll kind of hit my second one, which I think I kind of know the answer on. But so if you're doing, because I know when you're doing real lights, they all have dialogues that you can check a whole bunch of stuff. But when you do a panel light, that's what it was called, right? Like if you're going to make a TV be emissive.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do they have a shadow casting option the way normal lights do?
Let me open up this camera and see if I can open that up. Well, I'm not going to be able to find my other picture I was looking for. Okay, so I don't really have a photo on that TV, right? And if I go in, let's grab a photo real quick, and let's see here.
Or even the fireplace,
Yeah. So if you click on these things, the main thing you get with the emissivity is the amount of lumens. Okay. So that's what I can control with that. Now there's some other map settings, but for the emissivity, this is what you have, is the ability to set a value for the emissivity. And so that's about all that you get with that.
So even if it's set to like a super intensive emissivity, it doesn't cast a shadow.
Right.
Okay. All right, cool. That's what I needed. Thank you.
Yep.
Got our next question is from John Anderson. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, let's check in with Anne Marie. Hi, Anne Marie. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Anne Marie from Ontario, Canada. Back to the light source question. I have a follow-up question on that. What is the trick to actually selecting that when you're in a room and you want to change it, or change the values of it? My experience has been that I pretty much have to delete everything that's on the floor to try and select that light source. I can't get to the middle of it, and it just wants to select anything else that is in the plan.
Okay. So Anne Marie, are you talking about being able to select this light source right here?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me pull this over here. So I have a kind of a lighting example here, and this was the one I was looking for. I think it was Brandon that called in. So I've got a couple of light sources here. One is just a light source that's in the corner. One, it's casting a shadow from the light source. And so sometimes it's difficult to select these. That one I happen to get easily, but when I move back over into the other plan here that I had open, it may be difficult to select it. So I drew a marquee around it, okay, to select it. I also will just simply go into the layer set and turn on the layer set that says all off, right? And then make sure that, you know, I type in light sources. I've got some other things turned on, and now I can get it.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, they are hard. They can be hard to select.
Yeah, I was doing a kitchen and I had a couple of light sources in there and over an island type thing, and it was impossible to select it to.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
So I use that all off layer set, and then I just turn things on and off as I need to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Carrie?
Yes, Scott, we have a question from Ashley. Hi, Ashley. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, calling from North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my question was, in the perspective view, when you were hiding the exterior walls, is there a way to also hide like exterior doors and windows?
So we've implemented that. It's automatic now. Let me switch back to a regular view here. And when I open up, let me just open up a brand new camera. So in this camera setting, right, when I click anything that's attached to this wall, and if you kind of peek inside this wall, there may be some electrical, right? There's electrical on the wall, right? And so when you turn that camera setting on now, which is under the Edit Active View toward the bottom, hide exterior facing items, anything that's attached to that wall will then turn off. Now, I am using version X17, so there's a disclaimer for Premiere X17, and we have updated that camera to make sure that anything that's actually attached to the wall, picture frame, electrical, doors, windows, will then also hide as that camera view is rotating around.
Okay, I'm using version 16 and I'm on a Mac, so I don't know if those are also factors.
Yeah, we won't hold using a Mac against you. I too use a Mac. No, it's we did enhance this in X17, and part of the enhancement is whatever is attached, physically attached to the wall or inserted into the wall will hide. And I believe I've got there's a niche over there in the shower, and as I rotate around, that niche is also hidden because that's considered an opening.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so check that out in X17. It's available for beta release. It's in digital lockers now. So if you have access to X16, you should be able to also have access to X17 and download it and take a look at it.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Ashley.
Scott, we have Bonnie here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
So I'm calling from Maine today.
Oh.
My question might be more support related, so please feel free to tell me so if that's the case. My question's about rope lights. I struggle to place them in the right spot. So, you know, like in a coffer, or like you had that vertical one you showed us earlier in the
Right.
presentation. You know, how do you get it? How did you get it into that place is, I guess, my question.
Yeah, sure. So let's take a look here, and let's go back over into, close that view, I guess. Let's go into our floor plan view and switch over to electrical. So in the bathroom, I've got at least 2 rope lights, one that's in the tray ceiling and one that's below the cabinet vanity, okay? So these rope lights accessible through your electrical tool, and I'm just going to draw one out in space here, right?
Yep.
That is going to default to my default settings for the electrical. And when you open this up, it's going to have a height, in this case, off a finished floor. Let's just put it up at, let's say, 48 inches, okay? And then distance between lights, I usually kind of space that out a little bit. So that's now kind of right in the middle of the room at 4 feet. Does that make sense? Let's take a peek in here. Okay, so
Yep.
you're all good with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yep, there he is. And then I think the other question was maybe vertical lights. Was that fair?
Yes, yeah, and like in your tray ceiling, you know, getting your light in the tray ceiling, is it just a matter of making sure you've got the right height and then the distance from the wall?
Okay, so if I open up this, in that room, I have the tray ceiling, right? And if we open this up, you can see the height of this is 120 inches.
Yep.
Okay, now if you click inside a room, and let's see, this is a room, yeah. If you click inside of a room and you use the automatic tray ceiling tool.
Yep.
You're familiar that you can add a rope light through that tool?
Yes.
Okay, so if I just click and make a tray ceiling in here, in that little tiny room, there is rope lights, and you can go through and add the rope light, and then it will give you the offset information. So if you wanted to pull it down right below the molding, you can do that as well.
Okay.
And so that would be embedded with your tray ceiling, and you would access that through your tray ceiling object itself, and then go to the rope light settings, and then you can adjust the, you know, the horizontal offset, and then also your lighting information. When you click on the edit, kind of the same information that I was in there, the amount of lights, the light data, all those things you access through there. Now, I had free drawn the rope light in that tray ceiling, okay? And then the other thing that I did in this scene, let me turn on my other moldings so you can see these. And so when you, let me just take a simple 3D view of this room so we can see what we're talking about. Okay, so you see that little orange light that's kind of enclosed by the molding there?
Yep.
And I'm in a standard view, so this isn't that pretty, but I want to show you what, you know, all that is a 3D, it can be either a 3D solid or it can be a molding. And the key to that, once you've drawn it, is to then set the emissivity of that material. And I've got that cranked up to emissivity setting of 30,000, right?
Yep.
And are you comfortable with knowing how to create something that would look like that?
Yeah, I've created 3D objects before.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just show something real simple. If I create a 3D solid, let's just put something in the middle of the room. So I just drew a rectangular object here, which is a solid, and we set the height of that to be 66 inches. and floor to bottom, right? I've got this, let's go back into the view and let's see if we can pull that over. Okay, so I've got this great big solid. Probably not good to have a pole near the end of the bed, but okay. So now I can take that material and spray it on there. And if we just go out to our library here, and let me grab that. And let's say, for example, we came into our manufacturers and we grabbed a paint from Behr, and we'll just grab this paint and I'll paint that to be this color, right? And then I can mark that color to be emissive on the properties panel, and we'll just set it to be, you know, something like that. And then when you take your, you know, your 3D view, you're going to have something that's very bright. Again, I'm in the standard view, so that would look much different than, you know, if we were in the regular ray trace view. Does that work?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
More
Scott,
questions, Carrie?
Yep, we have John Anderson. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, let's check in with Camilla. Hi, Camilla. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, hi, Scott. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Carmel, California.
Oh, okay.
I was when I this last project that I work on, it has vaulted ceilings, and when I set the camera and it was working fine. But so then close the file, went to open the next day, and the camera, all the settings seem like to not work anymore.
Oh.
And I was wondering why. So then I messed with the exposure, like it was on automatic exposure. I changed to manual, added some light sources, and then it worked. But then at a different time, it went back to normal. So it got all bright. So I went and changed back to automatic. So I wasn't sure why.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that I have any magic answers for you as far as that goes. One of the things that I will do with my cameras is once I feel like the camera's dialed in, I'm going to delete this gigantic pole in the middle of the in the room. Once I feel like my camera is kind of dialed in, then I will save the camera. And there's a setting up in your toolbar that says Save Active View, or there's one next to it that says Save Active View As, so you can make a copy of it. And then I get into the habit of naming my camera, right? And then all of your define options and those kinds of things. Now, let's say that I've moved this camera around or made changes to it in some way. And let me just rotate it a little bit, right? So I've now changed the camera, and maybe I made some settings, changes in here. You can reset the camera view since you last saved it. And I've added this tool on my toolbar on the right-hand side, Reset Saved Camera. And you can also access that, I believe, up in the 3D menu. Where is this saying? Camera view settings. And I'm looking for Reset Saved Camera. And there's really two tools here, reset all your settings or just reset the position. So when I use that, which is what I put on my toolbar over there, it repositions the camera. Now, if you've made settings, saved your plan, closed your plan, come back the next day, and you're like, oh, darn, I didn't save it. I'm not sure you have a lot of options. You could go into your archive file and see if you had a previous camera saved in there and pull that camera out and look at it. And then you could copy that back into your plan. So that could be an option.
Well, those are all saved cameras that I just opened one day. It was fine the day before, the day after, the next day was just all dark. I didn't make any changes. That's why it was weird. And sometimes when I do rope lighting under cabinets, it gets almost like a glitch. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Are you using a light set?
No, I just saw the light set, so I need to look at more about that.
I'd mentioned in the pre-recorded remarks, if you aren't using a light set, the program may not turn on all the lights you want, right? If you look at this setting down here underneath lighting, I'm using a light set, but if you're just using automatic, right?
Mhm.
And let's say you're at 20 lights and then you add a new rope light. Some of those rope lights might have a light every 1 inch. And if you have a long strand of rope lights, well, 1 inch times however long your light is, there's a lot of lights in there. And so the program may turn off other lights so that it is in that limit. My default here is 20 lights once I clicked automatic. It will then limit the lights to that number, and it may not be the lights you want on and off. So by using a light set, you can force which lights you want on. And that
Okay.
opens up that dialog, right? And then in this dialog, you can sort it a few different ways by room or floor or on. And then you can come down here and pick and choose which lights you explicitly want on. And that's really the safest way to force and make sure all lights are on in a room, because I can sort that by a room. And now I can make sure that are all the lights on that I want, and I know it is. And so any light that I have turned on in that scene will be on that I want to be on or off.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Camelia.
Scott,
Okay,
did you
Gary,
wanna...
so why don't we do this? Why don't we take 2 more questions? I'll go through some closing remarks. I see there's still a bunch of questions out there, so to be respectful of people's time, I'll go through some closing remarks. You want to take off, go ahead and take off, and then I'll come back on and we'll take a handful more questions. So let's take 2 more and then I'll do some closing remarks.
Okay, our next question comes from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Thanks so much. I'm calling from Boulder, Colorado. And I have a question for vaulted ceilings. In the past, I have had an issue with putting recessed lights into vaulted ceilings where they basically just hover out in space. They don't, actually recess into the vault of the ceiling.
Okay.
Has that been fixed in X17?
I haven't seen that problem personally in a few versions, and I'm just not aware of it. And if you're seeing that problem, are you using custom ceiling planes, or are you using a ceiling that follows the roof in the vault?
I believe it was with custom ceiling planes.
Okay.
And it was like a open story. So the second story was open to the floor below. And so that 2-story height ceiling was vaulted, and the recessed fixtures just kind of hovered out in space, and I had to take each one of them and try to rotate it at just the right angle so that it would look like it was actually recessed into the vaulted ceiling, if that makes sense.
That sounds painful. Yeah, you know what I would do, if I take this simple room that I had open earlier, right? Let's just open this up. If I click in the room and let's click in the room and I simply, of course, I don't have a roof in here. Let's build a roof real quick. Gosh, all this stuff, automatic roofs. Okay, build the roof. And now when we go into the room and I remove the structure out of it, so it will then, force the ceiling to go up. The lights should follow the ceiling, right? And if you've drawn a custom ceiling, lights also should snap into that. Now, the one thing you mentioned is you now have this room divider where you have a open to below room. And there must be something to that process that you have that's causing the light maybe not to follow the appropriate ceiling plane. And I mean, you're welcome to send that in. We'll take a look at it. And
Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
I've noticed when I have a 2-story, like maybe a stairwell and the second floor ceiling is vaulted, I have to be careful to go to the second floor and place my lights instead of placing them on that first floor. Even though there's no ceiling, the lights don't know to jump all the way up to the vault on the second floor. So is it possible that's what's going on?
That's very
Right.
possible.
Right. So in this simple render example I have here, you want to make sure, I think what Adrian's pointing out is you want to make sure you put that light on the second floor, because really that's kind of where that light needs to be.
Right. Okay. And then just a follow up to Ashley's question about interior doors. Well, she asked about specifically doors, but not specifically on interior doors. If I have a really small bathroom, let's say a powder room, half bathroom, and I'm trying to get a render in that space, sometimes I will pull my camera back and I'll even make the wall invisible, the interior wall that's on the hallway. But if there's a door there, it's not making my door invisible. So has that in the new features of X17 been addressed at all?
So that view that I had up on my screen, let me just grab this. This view that I have up on my screen here. So this is a powder room in the middle of the floor plan. And so I've done two things to get this view. And so hide exterior facing walls is what it says it does. It hides the wall if it's exterior to the house. Well, this wall is not exterior to the house, right? It's interior to the house. So what I've done here is I took this and let's just kind of peek down in here. I took this wall and I put the wall to be invisible. So you click on the wall, turn it to be invisible. Okay, well then you're left with anything else on that wall, which is kind of why the camera is pretty nice, that says hide exterior facing items, and it will then, you know, hide any items on there, including the electrical. So when I click on this wall and I toggle it to be invisible, well, the door, I think is what you're saying, is still there, right?
Yes.
And let's just kind of toggle that. There we go. So there it is, right? The wall's invisible, but the electrical and then the door are still there. Yeah. And so what I've done to create this view is I put those items on a layer, you know, doors invisible or electrical invisible or doors layer 4 invisible or whatever you want to do, and then turn the layer off. It's not maybe the most elegant solution, but that's how you can do it.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I can, run a really quick question on the lights. Is there an option to adjust Kelvin temperature, like 2700 Kelvin or 4000 Kelvin? Is that an option as of yet?
There's no Kelvin setting. I'll pause here if anybody wants to weigh in on it. I mean, basically what I end up doing on my light, let me go back into the electrical here. What I do for my light information is I'll open up one of those lights, and on the light color itself, I'll go in and look up the Kelvin information. I'll pull that over onto my screen, right? And then I'll use the eyedropper, and then eyedropper that temperature setting onto it. Now, I'm going to pause here and see if any of the staff members or anybody wants to chat it in, if you have a better way of saying, how do I get the temperature setting for the lights inside of this color setting? Anybody out there want to weigh in on that?
That's probably the best way to do it, although this is a frequent request and it's something we may get to sooner than later.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
So Lisa, just pull over your Kelvin little chart that you have and then use the color eyedropper and pick it in there. You can also save those colors if it's a certain color. Save those colors in your library and then you have access to them. And then you can name them, 2700, 4000, 6000, whatever they are. And then you'd have access to them. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to take one more question, then I'm going to go through some closing remarks, let you guys go. However, I will come back if there's still questions out there. So Carrie, let's take one more question. I'll go through some closing remarks.
Thanks, Scott. We have Bethany here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for being here today. I'm coming from Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
I have a question about, so you've talked about how some lights will work and some won't. I've gone in and adjusted the amount of lights that can be on. I've played with the settings, and for some reason, I can't get certain lights to come on, even though they are saying that all views are usable. So do you know why that might be?
Are you using a light set?
I have not. This is the first time I have heard about using a light set.
Yeah.
So that is something that I would like to play around with.
So I would use a light set. I kind of zoom out here. We've been talking about this plan. I've got a bunch of electrical in here with rope lights and with all of the different lights, and you open up these views, there's just a lot of lights in here. Mm-hmm. And if I set the number of lights to, and you pick a big number like 100, it still might not turn on these lights in this room. Mm-hmm. Because the program is thinking it's smarter than you are. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And make sure you just use a light set and then you can force it. Again, that setting underneath your camera is light sets, right? Adjust lights. And make sure you're using a light set, and in there, go in there and make sure you forced it to have those lights on.
Yeah, so I did try, even though I haven't created a custom light set, I did go in and click on light set and then clicked adjust lights. Mm-hmm. And it says, that the light is on in all views.
Okay.
The lumens are set higher than 0.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm just confused as to why it would still not be turning on.
Well, just verify, Bethany, again. Mm-hmm. Once you've got your camera open, I've got a camera open here, and go into your camera panel, and at the bottom down here, make sure that the light set is checked, and that in the, we ship with a default light set in the program, right? That's usually the only one you're going to see.
Yeah.
And each time you do a new plan, you need to do these because they, your plans change. But if you're using the default light set, that could have sometimes I use this light set because usually every single light's on in here. And so once I click that and it's done, right, I know that every light in a single plan is going to be turned on. Maybe not very efficient, but I know that every single light will be on. And again, I just try to use a light set because it's more efficient and targeted to a room or multiple rooms, right? Because if you are looking at this from the other direction and you're seeing the closet, you may want some of the lights turned on in the closet so you can force lights on that you want to make sure are on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly how to, it's just strange. It's still not turning on, but yeah, I'll just play around with it some more and maybe.
If it's not working, send it in to us and we'll look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So, hey, thanks everybody for calling in today. Wanted to point you to a few things we have coming up. One, just a couple of remarks about today's presentation. We're going to be sending out a recording of the presentation in the next day or so. Usually it's on Friday. And then We're also going to include a survey in there. So if you would be kind enough to give us a little bit of feedback, we'd appreciate that. We've got a couple more presentations coming up. And I'm going to start actually with the events page. Our Chief Academy, it's a great event. If you can come to Coeur d'Alene, it's a good time. We do this in the summer for a reason in Coeur d'Alene. It's nice. So this is a couple of days of training, half-day focus sessions, and then we do lots of social networking, river cruise, lake cruise, those kinds of things. We do on-demand training. If you want to do one-on-one training, we do that. And then we've got a boot camp coming up tomorrow. So if you're new or new-ish to the program, this is a free boot camp. It's a couple hours, and you can kind of watch what we recommend with kitchen and bath design. Next Thursday, we're going to be covering 3D text and dimensions. And if you create any diagrams for, and this is an example of a vanity, creating diagrams or you want to do any annotations, this is a nice way to learn how you can use these tools. In X17, we've implemented 3D text. In X16, we implemented 3D dimensions. So we'll go through the process of using those. And then the final X17 session will be the following Thursday. We'll be talking about productivity tips for using that version of the program, and can be some pretty nice things that we'll point you to for productivity tips. So with that said, have a great day, and I'm going to come back and take a couple more questions, but to be respectful of your time, if you need to take off, then hey, thanks for attending. I hope you got some good takeaways. With that, Harry, I'm going to come back on and take a few more questions if there's still questions out there.
We have a few. The next one is Maria. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, let's see what Holly has to say. Holly, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, I think you said Holly. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My question for you is, in your cameras, how did you achieve the low light coming through the windows that helps highlight your interior light set?
Holly, where are you calling from today?
Oh, sorry, Oregon.
What part of Oregon?
Portland.
Okay. Well, welcome. So are you talking about, like, I've got a room scene open, this is a live camera, and I don't have a lot of light coming in? Is that
Yeah,
kind of
so
what
the
you're
problem
looking
that
for?
I have a lot of the time, and a lot of my colleagues, when we try to use physically based, is I know now that we need to use light sets, number one, but number two, we always get a lot of light coming through from sunlight. So
Okay.
what is your sunlight set to?
Okay, so when you have sun coming through the windows, you don't see a lot of the lighting in the rooms.
Right.
And so I like to turn the sun down,
okay,
so you can see the lighting in the room. And when you look at the Edit Active View tool, and let's mess with this a little bit. So underneath the sunlight, right? Adjust sunlight.
Uh-huh.
Right now, I'm using a generic sun. And I like to adjust the generic sun without respect to what the real world is. And you can see my tilt angle is pretty low, 4.24 degrees, and then there's a direction angle. So when you're in this view, and let's just mess around with this here just a little bit, I can actually click on the sun itself, and let me turn off line drawing because it's taking a little bit longer. I'm going to turn off line drawing. Okay, so when I'm in this view, I'm going to click on the sun. So I'm going to move over. Do you see where the sun is on the left-hand side?
Yes.
So it turns out you really can move the sun.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag up. You see the sun coming up?
Okay.
Okay, so this is not what is happening in the real world. It's kind of fake positioning of the sun, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's pretty nice to be able to adjust the sun. Okay, well, why isn't it blowing out the rest of my scene? You know, and I've seen this before. Sometimes the scene will get blown out where it looks like nuclear winter outside. Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
Okay, well, a couple of things that you can look at. Let's go back into the sun. And now you can see that we've actually moved the tilt angle from 4 degrees to minus 25 degrees. So I pulled the sun up, right? So it's at minus 25. I also probably changed the angle of it. Well, now there's this sun intensity. You see that at 100,000?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if I'm using a backdrop image, I'm probably going to turn this down, but I'm not using a background image, so I've got it kind of turned up. I'm using what's called a generated sky.
Ooh, okay.
Let me cancel this, and let's go into our backdrops. Where is that? Backdrops. Okay, so I'm using a generated sky, and that is on the backdrop panel. Check generated sky. There's some settings in here for starlight. You know, if you pull the sun down, you can get stars, density, moon, tilt angles, and a few other things. If you have questions about that, click on the help button. So I'm using a generated sky. Now, if I switch this over and let's select a backdrop from one of my backdrops, and where are we here? Backdrops. And let's just pick one here. So I'm going to use an image for a backdrop. Sometimes it gets different. You see how it now kind of looks like it's muddy outside or a little dingy? Well, okay, there's a few more settings here. So let's take a look at those settings and see if we can dial it in. So let's move back over onto the camera. And let's come down to the camera define option. And you see where it says backdrop, daytime backdrop intensity? So this is how much light is going to be contributed from the backdrop.
Okay.
And that's a function of what kind of backdrop image do you have?
Yes.
Some of them are very different colors. Some of them actually you can use as an HDRI image, which can contribute light into the scene. But if let's crank that up to, well, let's lower it to 100. And let's just see what the change is. Let's lower it to 100, right? So now I'm getting the effects. I still get the sun coming in, but now the backdrop image is much lower. And if we flip that from 100, let's go back up the other way and let's go to 10,000 or, well, that'd be pretty, let's try 5,000, see if that works. And so a little bit of hit and miss with your images on how you want to dial those in. So there's a bunch of settings that you can tweak in here. One of the things that I like to do for, let's say, an interior scene, I'll just pull this up so you can take a look at this. These are kind of my tips on what I would set my sun information on and exposure. Again, there's a big variance of what works well. This is usually my starting point for an interior render scene.
Okay.
And then I have to monkey with it.
Sounds good. Great. That helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Holly.
Scott, we have David here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. I'm in Kensington, Maryland, and I met you last week at the FAST conference, too.
Oh, well, hello.
Hi. You almost answered this question when you were showing the TV set in that bedroom. How do you put an image on that? And just to push the envelope a little bit, could you actually put a video on there?
Probably not inside of our program as far as a video. So how do you put an image? How do you put an image on the TV? Well, one, you can find one in the library, add it by clicking once you find the image and adding it on there. Let's scroll down into my user catalog. One of the things sometimes what I'll do is I'll take renderings And let's say I want a rendering of the house itself. And let's see if I can grab that artwork. That looks like a weird, let me change that. Okay. So what I've done here is I've taken a rendering of the outside of the house, and all I did was add that into my library, and then I clicked and applied it onto the TV to do that. And then you know how to set the emissivity of that, so you can pop it up a little bit. So if I click on that, on the emissivity setting, we'll try 30. I don't know, that might be too much. And then that will illuminate the screen a bit.
Yeah.
Does that work?
That sounds easy.
So you can import these pictures. You can take one with your cell phone, or in my case, I just exported the rendering, file, export, file, export, picture. And then I've got that on my, let's say my desktop, and then I can bring that into the program, and then, I'll put that on the TV screen.
Yeah. So I could pull in a picture of the customer or our logo or anything like that.
Sure. Yep. Whatever you want to put on the TV screen, then you can just simply grab that and apply it onto the surface, and then it will show up. I sometimes put things on there. Sometimes I, depending on what it is.
Yeah, I think the spray can was what I was missing.
Yep. So just open up the library once you've got it in there. Find your picture, and then you can click and just paint that on there, whether it's artwork or whatever it is.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for calling in. Carrie?
Thanks, Scott. We have Vicki here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Vicki.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Vicki.
My initial question has kind of been answered in the chat, which is basically, when are you going to have hide camera facing interior walls? They gave me some hints on that. But
what was there? What was your answer you got?
Well, they had some settings and stuff I could try that it's still going to be a workaround, but I added it as a request to the never-ending list of requests.
And you saw how we did the scene earlier, right?
Yeah, I did, but it would be so less time-consuming if you had that fun. So
okay.
The request. But my other question on the TV thing, what I did is I stood in front of our big screen TV and I took photographs of our weatherman, is pointing to the map and all of that. And I turned that into what I put on my TV screen. And it comes in super bright. Can you dim the image, or would you just show it with less emissivity?
Yeah. Well, your image, I mean, you can only Photoshop that so much.
Right.
And then on the emissivity control is how you would turn on the how much brightness you're getting. Sometimes I only turn them on very slightly, even though the drop down doesn't show it. I might just turn it on just slightly because I don't want it to be overbearing in the room. And sometimes I don't even like to use things on the TV screen because that's what people focus on, right? And this is one of my favorite scenes. I've got a TV screen over here with a Ford GT on it, and everybody knows what a Ford GT is, of course. And so being able to, depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but your emissivity settings are just kind of depends on what your goal is with your render.
Okay, I'll experiment with that a little bit because in some room settings it does come along pretty bright. And then I've also done one of late night TV, and I sometimes use that in an evening bedroom scene because that's when you're going to watch late night TV. But the local weatherman has kind of become like a signature point on my stuff because who else is going to know who Darrell Winninger is?
I don't know him.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't because you don't live in Bend. So it's kind of like a little ID thing. you know, this is my plan. It's not your weatherman, it's my plan.
Okay.
Anyway, I also want to say that, you know, I've been using Chief since I think version 9. Every time I watch one of these presentations, I either learn something brand new or I'm reminded about something that I knew but forgot. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks for calling in. Have a great day. Carrie, couple more questions, huh?
Yep, we have John here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, John.
All right, I'm John from Hampton Roads, from coastal Virginia, and I was wondering about trying to place like a pendant light on a vaulted roof. I tried to put a pendant light over a kitchen sink that had a vaulted roof, and it placed it 90 degrees to the angle of the roof slope. And when I tried to rotate it, it created all kinds of crazy zigzag lines on the pendant bar.
Oh, yeah, that sounds crazy. Let's see if we can open up this plan. So I vaulted this this ceiling in here, right? And would this work as an example to put a pendant light in?
Yes.
Let's switch this view over so it's a little easier to see. I'll turn on line drawing. Okay, so in this view, right? Let's open up. Now, John, did you get this pendant light out of our library?
I did, yes.
Okay, pendant lights. Let's just go and grab one out of the library. And for lack of a better thing, I'm just going to grab this one in here. And let's put a couple in here so we can see. All right, so you can see that those look actually okay. The base may not be rotated. So a couple things you might check on the light itself. Let's open this up and let's take a look at it. So the first thing is on your 3D information. Let's see here, where is that setting? Options. So I've opened up this light, and on the options panel, do you see this okay, John?
Yes.
So I'm on the placement of this electrical light, and right now it's ceiling mounted. Okay, now if I were, let's make it a little crazy. Let's change it to be flush mounted. Let's see what happens. Right?
That's like what I saw, yeah.
Yeah, so you might just check that option in the pendant light. Could be maybe one of our lights out there had that setting checked, and you might just verify and check that. I would point you to that first.
Okay.
Does that work?
It's definitely something to try, yeah.
Yeah. If not, you know, send the plan in. We'll support group take a look at it for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, John. Okay, a couple more questions here, Carrie.
Yep, we have 2 more questions. The next one is from Melissa. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Scott, it's Melissa. I met you last year in Austin, Texas at Fast Remodeler.
Ah, okay. Well,
yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. This was a great webinar. The lighting is a big issue for me, so figuring all this out is fabulous. I'm wondering, so the girl that was asking about the light set earlier, is it possible, because I'm working on a room right now that doesn't have any cans.
Okay.
So if you check the default light set and you wanted to turn the lights on, but if there aren't any lights in the room, will it still illuminate it enough for physically based?
Well, in the physically based, you're not going to have any lights because there are no lights. Okay. In the standard view, we kind of fake it a little bit.
I noticed.
It will give you the perception of light. But if you're going to, you know, have lighting information, you've got to have your lights, right? And
so how would I fake having the lights in the room when there's no cans in the room? It's just a chandelier and no other lighting in that room except for that chandelier, and so it's rather dark. So what would you do to force it or fake it, if you will?
Put a bunch of windows in there. Well, one, you could turn up the light or add lights to your chandelier, right? Lights can have more than one light on them. This one here, let's just pick on this this light. Even though I can see through it, it only has one light. But you can go to the light data, right? And there is some light information in here. And if I wanted to, only one light, but if I wanted to add a light, let's add a light. And then I can move it around. So let's turn this on so we can kind of see where that light is. And let's move that down 33 inches or something. Okay, so here's a light. Let's add one more light. And let's move this down minus 22 inches. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to worry about showing all of these, but here's all of the different lights. And I can just keep adding these and then turning on the light itself. So I've got 3 lights associated with this fixture.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's great.
And so when you get a larger light scene, I don't know, well, let's see if I have that handy here. This isn't a good example, but when you when you get a scene and you've got a great big chandelier that's going to span some amount of area, then you could add a whole bunch of lights on there, and that way try to illuminate the scene more so, and then crank up, if you've got a tall ceiling and that sort of thing, crank up the number of lumens.
Okay. So, and how do you turn the position of the lights off again in the render so that we don't see it? Where's the button for that? Show position in the camera. Okay, I love it. That's great.
So when that's turned on, right, you can actually see where that light's being emitted from, and it can be helpful to troubleshoot where the light is. If you've got some hot spot, somebody called in earlier with a hot spot from lights, possibly I use this to troubleshoot. Maybe it helps.
No, that's great. It's a great workaround. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Melissa, the other thing you can do is you can use fake lights, and those were those lights that I pointed people to earlier, where they're just, add lights, and you can add those as fake lights, right? And I think, well, let's see if I can reset my camera here. So these are fake lights. Right, I've got a fake light toward the dog. I've got a light in the corner, and what those are, they're not real lights.
Okay, where did you get those from?
So that's underneath your 3D menu, lighting, and add lights.
Okay, great.
And
fantastic.
Yeah, maybe that helps.
It helps a lot. Thanks so much. It's perfect.
Okay, Carrie, our last question here.
Yep, our last question is from Bill. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. This is Bill from Annapolis, Maryland. And I'm doing a house with a lot of glass facing the water. And we are looking at glass that has various degrees of reflectivity. And I'm trying to figure out how to render that or adjust my glass. It's the same effect on your bedroom picture where you can see the lights reflected in the glass. Mm-hmm. That seems to be natural to your glass, but is there any way to adjust that?
So in your material properties, let's flip back over here. Oh gosh, a lot of stuff open. So in your material properties, if I click on this window here, which you can have different, this is called standard glass. And right now, the information for this, I'm in a physically, Bill, are you trying to accomplish this in the physically based rendering view?
I'm still using a GPU ray trace.
Okay, yeah. And so this is the physically based ray trace view. I only ask because some people use the standard render view, and so I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Actually, I had that confused. CPU is, I have an older Apple, so.
So you're using CPU ray trace?
Yeah. And so when I go into the materials dialog, it doesn't give me, I'm looking at the same thing you are under transparent, is that I don't see reflectivity, or it says index of refraction.
Right.
but that didn't get the result.
So if your material is marked as glass, okay, then there are some settings in here. If I change that from not transparent, let's just change it to polished. As soon as I change it, the glass option goes away. So I'm going to switch that back to transparent. And once I come down into the transparent setting, there's the index of infraction. And there's a couple of different glasses that we have. We have a flint glass and a crown glass. I think flint may have some more infraction or less infraction. And then lead crystal. And so you can change the infraction values here. That's basically going to distort how the light's going to go through the glass. There is a transparency setting up here, but there's a little asterisk there that says it only applies to ray trace views. So I usually crank that on my shower glass so I can see it in my non-ray trace views, standard views. However, if you're trying to get reduced reflectivity of your glass,
Actually, I'm trying to increase it.
Oh, you're trying to increase it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a half mirrored coating that they're putting on the glass, and it's a blue color. So it's been fun to play with the material, but I'm.
So what I would end up doing is I would maybe adjust your room scene so you're going to get some reflection of the sun or something like that. Let me just grab this camera real quick. I would probably try to adjust your positioning of the camera. Let's see if I have that one.
Yeah, and it's the exterior is where it kicks in.
Let me just grab this. I'd probably try to adjust the camera angle so that you're getting some reflectivity of something, right?
Okay.
And if I open up this view here, which apparently is going to take a little bit of time here. Okay, let me turn off line drawing. I've got a laptop and it's not the fastest, and I like to have line drawing on, but it does take more of my computer than not. Oh boy. And so what I would end up doing here is first of all, my camera angle here is kind of top down and I'm not seeing the reflection of the glass, right? Very good. And so I'd probably tilt the camera so I can see the glass, and then I'm going to pull maybe the sun information around so that it's going to give me more reflection. This is super slow. Sorry.
Okay, but
does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. That was.
And you said you're using a Mac?
Yes, and I agree with you. My laptop that I bought when I first signed up with Chief Architect 6 years ago is now obsolete. So.
Well, all computers become obsolete, some faster than others. The good news is Macs are expensive, and gosh, well, I don't know if that's good news.
No.
Yeah, my computer is clearly taking a long time, but I've got an example here that I can pop open that. Let me see if I have that handy. So you see how I'm getting some reflection off of the glass in this scene? And again, it's the positioning of the angle of the camera. I know that I had one where I've got the pool out the back. This is kind of more of a nighttime scene. And if I tilt the camera down, you're going to see more reflection when that sun comes off of, and I don't have that handy. You're going to see it come off of the reflection. Let's see if this, yeah, that doesn't have it either. It's a matter of making sure the angle of the camera is pointed so you're getting some reflective surfaces angled at the camera, and your lighting and or your sun are then reflecting into that glass.
Okay. We'll give it a try. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. All right, so hey, I want to thank everybody for coming to today's session. I've got just a couple things I'm going to point you to and push you along on your way. Chief Academy, if you want to come to Coeur d'Alene, attend our training and social events, it's a great opportunity. That's at the end of August. On-demand training, if you want to visit with us online, screen share. Tomorrow is our kitchen and bath boot camp, new or newer to the program. Our boot camp is a nice learning opportunity. 3D text and dimensions next Thursday. And then the following Thursday, productivity tips around X17. That's all I got for you today. Have a great day. Thanks for attending, and hopefully we'll see you back here same time, same place next week.